You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, your host for BioTalk. And it's been a long time coming, but this is someone we wanted to have on this podcast for many years, and we finally got to that point. And we have one of the leading people who helps provide early stage funding to life science companies in America with us today. And I think that will get the listeners' attention as we start off. We have Michael Weingarten, the director of SBIR Development Center at the National Cancer Institute, which is the largest NIH institute, with us on BioTalk today. Michael, welcome to BioTalk.
Thanks so much for having me today, Rich. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I guarantee you the listeners are going to enjoy everything you have to say. I already told everybody what you do and where you're at, but we didn't go into much detail about your background. Rather than me read from your CV or your resume, I think it's better that you give the listeners a little bit more about your background. So why don't you take it from wherever you want to start and bring us up where you are today?
So I've actually been in this role at the National Cancer Institute, managing the SBIR program since 2005. Seems like a heck of a long time to me and a little bit hard to believe, but it's really been a lot of fun. I was hired initially to figure out how to reimagine how the SBIR program should be managed at the National Cancer Institute. And I was given the opportunity to recreate the program at NCI, which was, I think, an opportunity to be creative and to look at some of the best models for how to manage this program. So we went and we actually interviewed a lot of the top agencies across the government that are managing their SBIR programs. Some of them include the National Science Foundation. I think they have a wonderful SBIR program. And then we brought some of those ideas and some ideas that we came up with on our own and brought that back to management here at the National Cancer Institute and also to the director of the NIH, and really came up with just a whole new way of managing this program. And I think our companies have really benefited from that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the program and your role and your staff and everything else, but you skipped over everything before you got to the NCI. I think listeners are trying to figure out what your background was that made you decide that you wanted to go work for the National Cancer Institute. So let's go backwards before we go forwards a little bit.
Before I came to the NCI, I worked at NASA for about 15 years. And I was in charge of partnership development for NASA's technology transfer programs. That included the SBIR program at NASA. So it was my job to work with all the different research centers across NASA, identify promising technologies and promising research that NASA was funding, and also identify potential dual-use applications for that technology. And by that, I mean, what sort of industry applications, non-space-based applications, could some of those technologies also have? We designed a pretty aggressive marketing and business development program at NASA where we had relationships with a lot of the major industry sectors so that we could build partnerships and collaborations to do joint technology development and to get American industry to pick up NASA technology. So that was a wonderful experience. Had the opportunity to create a lot of new programs there, and we were quite successful at spinning out a lot of NASA technologies. At the time, the deputy director at the NCI had seen some of the work that I had done, and she was quite interested in rethinking how the SBIR program at NCI should be managed, and she brought me over.
Well, great. Thank you for the background. But I think NASA was involved as one of those organizations involved in dual-use technology. For the old timers like myself who remember that term, we go back and people probably don't remember, but Tang was one of those that they used on the space shuttles, was one of those things that came out of that program.
And Velcro and Tang. Yeah, those were like two of the big ones. But I mean, a lot of folks don't know, but for example, some of the software and GPS technology actually came out of the Jet Propulsion Labs back in the 90s. NASA had a lot of really great success stories and successful technology transfer from the space program.
but then you went into also a very innovative organization in the National Cancer Institute and NCI. So let's talk a little bit about NCI as an institute, where it falls within the whole NIH spectrum. We'll do a little drill down more on your role as the director of SBIR Development Center at NCI.
Just a little bit of background. So there are 27 different institutes at the NIH. And as you mentioned, the National Cancer Institute is the largest. And our program at the NCI, we have the largest SBIR program across the NIH. In terms of budget, annually, last year our budget was about $200 million. This year we're estimating our budget will be about $185 million. We fund grants, we fund contracts, we fund technology development really across the cancer spectrum. So that includes drug development, which is the largest part of our portfolio, but also very active in funding device technology development, such as cancer imaging technologies, radiation therapy related technologies, also in the device space. We fund cancer diagnostics, research tools, and also digital health. So if you're developing a technology with a cancer application and your goal is to develop a product, then there's a good chance that you're a good fit for the SBIR program. And we tend to be probably one of the earliest funders of cancer technology development in the country. When someone is interested, they've got some intellectual property, maybe they developed their technology originally under a research grant, maybe at a university, they're interested in making that transition to a company. SBIR can be really a great source of funding to really start that journey.
You mentioned when they're ready to go to a company, but you also probably have an STTR component to your program as well, correct?
Yes. STTR is what we think of as kind of the sister program of SBIR. STTR, the goals are a little bit different in that the goal is to specifically transfer and transition a technology out of a university to a small business. And it's a great vehicle to do that. And STTR can be a great option for someone to consider for funding when they're still at the university. Maybe they're not ready to leave the university. They can actually partner with a small business to apply for an STTR grant under our program. And it's a good way to kind of get that work started.
Talk about your team a little bit. I know since you have the largest SBIR budget at NIH, you probably have built an interesting team in the 18 years you've been there.
The team is the strongest part of our program. They're what make our program. And so we've been very careful in how we've built our team over the years. We have a number of the original members of the team that I originally hired when I first took over the program that are still with us. If you look at my total team, we have 22 people who work for our team in terms of program directors who actually manage awards, manage grants, manage contracts. We have 12 different program directors. Most of those program directors have come to us with strong industry experience, where they have experience, for example, in developing drugs, developing diagnostics, and strong scientific background, but also, importantly for SBIR, strong industry backgrounds. I think one of the things that really distinguishes our program at the NCI is that we set up a center for managing this program, and we spend 100% of our time just working with small businesses. And we think for the size of the program and for the needs of our companies, small businesses obviously have a lot of needs because they're small and they don't have access to a lot of resources. We thought that was really an important way to set things up.
And when you talk about Center for Managing the Program, I understand the element of managing the grants and the application process and all of that. But after a company is a recipient of one of your awards, what are the other types of services they might be able to get from NCI?
So that's a great question and something that we actually spend a lot of time on. The first part of everyone's job is to manage the whole process of funding, making funding decisions on projects, and then managing an oversight of the projects themselves. But in addition to that, we've also woven in a lot of other resources that our companies have actually asked us to provide. Just as an example, I can walk through several of the different companies or different programs that we offer. On the very front end of the program, we offer a program called the Applicant Assistance Program. And this is a program that we offer to companies who've never received an SBIR before from the NIH, where we provide them a coach that can advise them as they're developing their application. In the Applicant Assistance Program, or what we call it AAP, it's actually a 10-week program. They work closely with the potential applicant, and they give them kind of an oversight of the entire application process and what the key components are to the application. And then they'll do different things, for example, like reviewing the specific aims that a potential applicant is putting together and giving them some feedback on whether the specific aims of a project match the kind of thing that we're looking for under SBIR. So they kind of walk them through the whole process. They make it easier for them to apply. Under that program, they will not write your application for you. That has to be done by the company, but they're really there to be more of a coach and providing advice. And we found that the Applicant Assistance Program has really been helpful to a number of companies in actually being able to get funding for the first time.
Is there any cost for that program?
To the company, no. It's something that we fund at the NCI through some administrative funds that we have for the program. There are a few other institutes that are also participating in the Applicant Assistance Program at the NIH.
Great, thank you. So I was interrupting you as you were getting ready to continue on some other ones.
Just to give you a little bit of a sense of just some of the other programs that we offer, we started offering a program back in 2014 called Innovation Corps, or I-Corps. This is a program that originally was started at the National Science Foundation. We really liked the model, and I brought that program to the NIH. And the whole goal behind the I-Corps program is once companies are in the program and they have a phase 1 award, which is the earliest phase of funding they can get from us at the NCI, if they have a phase 1 SBIR or STTR, they then become eligible to participate in the I-Corps program. Probably the best way to explain it is it's like an 8-week boot camp that teaches a small business how to build a business model around the technology that they're developing. And why that's so important is if you look at when companies first come into the program, a lot of times they're academic spinoffs, they're brand new startup companies. They come to us with excellent scientific backgrounds, but not a lot in the way of business backgrounds and expertise. Over the course of the 8-week program of I-Corps, they actually learn all the key aspects of how to build their business. For example, the first thing they focus on is what is their value proposition? What is the unmet need that the technology that they're developing really can help meet? And what clinical objective can they help achieve? For example, it might be a rare cancer that there isn't currently a good therapy for. If they're developing a cancer drug, I-Corps really helps them figure out what the best indication, what the best market is that they should be going after. And they do that by actually getting out in the field and talking to potential customers to better understand the need for the technology they're developing, both from the patient side and also talking to physicians to understand what physicians are looking for. So we find that I-Corps can be just a wonderful program to set the company up for future success and for applying for future awards from the NCI. Not just the NCI, I-Corps is a program that NIH offers as a whole across the NIH to SBIR companies. So I think one of our strongest programs.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some other programs later, but I'd like to just go into the different phases related to your program as well as different categories of awards. After we do that, though, I'm going to come back to you and talk about the application process and scoring, because that's really one of the biggest mysteries about what happens when that proposal goes in. But let's talk about what they can apply for first and sort of the size of the range of the awards that can be made under the different phases.
If you look at the earliest phase of funding they can apply for, a program that we just started a couple of years ago, it's called our Concept Award. And what's really exciting and unique about our Concept Award is we're looking for companies to come in with really radical, out-of-the-box ideas for developing new technologies for the detection, diagnosis, and treatment of both rare and pediatric cancers. When I say out of the box ideas, I'm talking about disruptive technologies, approaches that haven't been tried before, because we're talking about very difficult to treat cancers. One of the exciting things about the concept award is companies who apply for that actually do not have to have preliminary data when they come in. And that separates it from the typical SBIR application, where peer review really is looking for preliminary data. We have found that that's been a great way for us to pull in companies that are new to cancer, that have new approaches, that could really have a positive impact on treating those very difficult cancers in the areas of rare and pediatric cancers. So the funding size for that award is up to $300,000. Typically, that's a 6 to 12 month long project. Once we get past the concept award, companies can apply for what we call phase 1 SBIR or STTR funding. Phase 1 is what we call a feasibility study. If that's a drug, typically that will involve, as part of the project, getting some in vivo data. The sweet spot for phase 1, if it's a drug, would be lead optimization. If it's a device, it would involve the development of a prototype. So it really depends on the technology that we're talking about. And in all cases, what I suggest when you're thinking about applying, we encourage you to reach out to us and talk to us about your idea. We spend a lot of our time actually just talking to companies about project ideas that they'd like to propose to us and just giving them some advice. We'll actually go over specific aims for any applicant who wants to come in, and we'll give people feedback on their specific aims. So I mentioned phase 1. If phase 1 is successful, then you can apply for the next stage of funding, which is a phase 2 award. Phase 2 awards are up to $2 million at the NCI. Every institute has different funding levels, so I want to break out what the NCI allows. It's $2 million for a phase 2. And typically, phase 2 involves the continued research and development of the technology. If that's a drug, oftentimes that might be IND enabling studies. If it's a device, it'll involve studies to get that device towards the clinic, towards clinical trials. So typically that's $2 million, and that's usually a 2-year-long project. And then if that's successful, we have a third or fourth phase of funding. We called our Bridge Award program that we created at the NCI back in 2008. And the really exciting thing about the Bridge Award program is the goal of that is to really help the company get over the valley of death, which is really that time when they're almost in the clinic. They got some really promising data. They've made a lot of progress through their prior funding. But the goal of the bridge is to get that company to a key inflection point where they can then raise a lot of private capital and move to commercialization. So the bridge has been quite effective at doing that. We also structure the bridge in a way to attract private investors to invest jointly with the NCI. That actually has a matching funds requirement with it. For every dollar that we put into that Bridge Award program, the award size of a Bridge Award is up to $4 million. For every dollar that we have put into a Bridge Award, our companies in turn have been able to go out and raise about $4 in private capital. So it's been quite successful at moving companies along, and it's been quite successful at commercializing technologies. Out of all the awards we funded under the Bridge program, which is over 40, 19 of those projects have actually commercialized their technologies.
That's an extremely high success rate, Michael. So congratulations on that. And it's really something where most other programs stop. They really don't have that commercialization money that's really there to get people really ready for their Series A or their major seed funding after they've gotten some of this early stage funding that's necessary. So that provides a very valuable context. And I think there's some other things that in those phases, and I'm sure you have, and if someone's further along in a phase 1 and doesn't really have to go through that process, but they can actually go almost right to the phase 2, I think you have something called a direct to phase 2 or a fast track program as well, correct?
There are a lot of different options for companies. So, for example, let's say a company comes to us and they already have a lot of data. They, in effect, have accomplished proof of concept. If that's the case, then they could apply for either a fast track proposal, which is a combined phase 1, phase 2 application. or they can go for what we call a direct to phase 2 application. The benefit to both of those is that you only go through peer review once. If you apply for a fast track, which is the combined phase 1, phase 2, you don't have to go through peer review again before you get your phase 2. You accomplish the goals of the phase 1. The program director at the NCI agrees that you've accomplished those goals, and then you just automatically transition to the phase 2 of the project. That can be a really good option for a company. If you're a little bit further along, then you can go for a direct to phase 2. For example, let's say you have in vivo data, you have a lead candidate molecule, the direct to phase 2 might be a really good opportunity for you. So we always encourage folks is talk to us first so you know which application is really the best fit for you.
I think that's a critical point that you just bring up there. And I don't know if people understand the magnitude, but a lot of people go in blind and have never interacted with the institute or the agency or the program manager. And one of the first things we always tell everybody is you got to talk to the program manager first, just to even see if you are really a candidate to be making an application at the stage of development or evolution you're at. And most people think they're hard to get to, but basically that's part of their job. Part of their job is to access and talk to emerging companies, small businesses that are thinking about applying, but not exactly sure whether they're right to apply yet.
Absolutely. And the first step I would probably encourage everyone to do on your podcast is go up to our website, which is at sbir.cancer.gov. And you can find out a lot of great information about the program there. And you also, from the homepage, you can send us an email and request to set up a call with us, which we'll follow up on immediately. It's just good to have that conversation where we can kind of demystify the process. At NCI, we also hold office hours where we'll set up times where people can just call in and get their question answered during an office hour. To learn about the next event that we're doing, and we do a lot of stuff online, we do webinars, etc. If you sign up on our website for our email list, then you'll automatically learn whenever we're doing a new event. We'll be the first to let you know. And we actually have one that's coming up in just a month. It's a webinar that we're putting together on keys to filing a successful IND. You asked me about resources that we offer. One of the things that we do is we offer what we call the Plan webinar series. And every couple of months, we'll put on a webinar where we will bring in one of our serial entrepreneurs that we have funded in the past that has gone on to be quite successful. And we'll get them to talk about a key topic that's of interest to our community. And so this one coming up on December the 1st, we actually have 5 of our companies that are going to be participating in this. And each of them are going to offer kind of their own lessons learned on how to successfully file an IND. And they'll be getting into IND meetings, how to use CROs, CMC, toxicology, clinical protocols, regulatory guidance documents, and really a lot of the pitfalls that companies face when they're putting together their INDs. So I encourage everyone to listen to that. They'll have the opportunity to learn a lot.
Well, the NCI SBIR program is a one-stop shop to learn everything you need to do to build a successful life science company, Michael.
We do what we can. Then we love to work with other groups on the outside. And we love working with the EIRs, the entrepreneurs in residence, Rich, that you provide to the NIH as a whole and to the NIH seed office. And a lot of our companies have been able to take advantage of their expertise too, particularly in regulatory matters. And you have some wonderful EIRs that know how to communicate with investors and how to put together a really strong pitch deck. So we work closely with the really great talent that you brought on board through the Entrepreneurs in Residence.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Michael. And we've demystified the different types of phases and everything that are available to apply for. But last part of this preliminary process is, once you apply, how long does it take for your proposal to be reviewed? Who does the reviewing? There's this mystique about scoring, and how does scoring work? And then what percentage of the applicants who actually apply actually win, maybe on their first, second, or third try?
That's a loaded question, and I'll do my best to answer it. Let me walk through each of the different pieces of your question. Once you apply, it typically takes 2 months before your application will go through peer review. And who does the peer review? The peer review is actually done by reviewers that are essentially our peers that are experts in a given field that NIH identifies. The peer review is done and is managed by the Center for Scientific Review at the NIH. Typically, it's made up of what we call a study section, and there might be 20 or so experts in a given field that are members of that study section, and your application will be assigned to 3 or 4 reviewers typically. They're going to grade your application on what the key review criteria are. They're going to look at significance. They're going to look at the approach that you're following. They're going to look at the investigators. They're going to look at the environment. And they're going to look at the innovation. How highly innovative is your project? And specifically, with that innovation, are you going after an unmet need? Based on those 5 key criteria, they will then give you a score. The best score that you can get, if it's a grant application, the best score that you can get is a 10. The worst score that you can get is 100.
It's almost reverse of what you would think.
I know that can be a little bit confusing, but that's the way it works. You want to get a 10. That's a perfect score, so very hard to come by. Difficult and very challenging the very first time you apply to get funded on that first project. The success rate for first-time applicants, typically that's going to be under 10%. One of the most valuable things that you get, though, when you do apply is you get what's called a summary statement, which comes back from the review committee. And the summary statement outlines what the strengths and the weaknesses of your application are, and you get comments from the 3 or 4 reviewers that were assigned to review your application. So they give you really excellent feedback that you can then use when you reapply. And we encourage all of our companies, if you're not successful the first time, then come back, review your summary statement, then reach out to us on the program side and talk to us, get our thoughts, get our advice on what to consider when you resubmit that application. Typically, that's really helpful. What we find is that the success rate on second applications is 2 to 3 times higher when they resubmit. If you look at the averages overall, the success rate for a phase 1 application, this includes first-time applicants as well as resubmissions, is 10 to 15%. If you look at phase 2 applications, the success rate is 20 to 25%. It's competitive, but it's also achievable. And if people put the time and effort into writing a strong application, they take the time to review the comments from peer review, and then they talk to us on the program side, that can really help you be successful in getting funding.
Thank you for that information. It's sort of behind the scenes what actually goes on after you've submitted that proposal. The other thing is, if you look at all the different elements of the proposals and grants and awards that you have, Michael, a single company, if they go through the whole process and they achieve all of their milestones each time in every one of the different award categories that they're eligible for, they could probably get $7 to $10 million from the National Cancer Institute.
I mentioned the concept award, phase 1, phase 2, and then bridge award. They can access between $6 and $7 million across all those different awards for the same technology. We've seen companies actually do that. We have some wonderful success stories. Just as an example, a company called Immunomedics that we funded back around 2010 initially, and they developed this drug for targeting triple-negative breast cancer. As I tell folks, it takes a long time to develop a drug, 10 years on average. When we started funding them back in 2010, they were able to apply for multiple phases of funding for us. They were successful. In 2020, they received approval from the FDA for their drug, and they were purchased by a larger pharmaceutical company later that year for about $20 billion. So just a really big success story, and just shows you how SBIR can be a real key piece of a company's success, where you're not going to be able to take your technology all the way to commercialization typically with SBIR, The goal is SBIR is to get your company to a point that you can successfully raise other funding that will then get you to commercialization.
I would imagine that's just one example of many success stories that you have that you could tell.
Yeah, Immunomex is a great one. I was actually just talking to the head of the NCI just yesterday about another really interesting story. Another company called Trace Biosciences. This is a company that's developing this fluorescent imaging technology that allows a surgeon to light up the nerves during surgery and allows the surgeon to then spare those nerves because they can see where the nerves are. They can avoid them and not cut them out when they're instead going after a tumor. Trace has developed a really fascinating technology. They went through our mentoring program at the NCI, program that we also offer, where we bring in 2 to 3 experts to advise a company on a specific problem that they're trying to solve. Through their mentorship, we actually help them focus on what was the right indication, the cancer indication they should be going after with their project and their drug. They're actually pursuing it for prostate cancer surgery, prostatectomy specifically. They made a lot of progress by going through our mentoring program and learning from that opportunity.
Well, I'm sure we could go on for hours talking about all the success stories you've had, but let's talk about some of the other things that are important to NCI right now. One of them is diversity, equity, and inclusion is growing in importance throughout the United States in all different elements of business. And so talk a little bit about what the NCI efforts are to enhance diversification in your entrepreneurship programs that you offer.
I mentioned the applicant assistance program earlier. One of the primary audiences we're targeting the applicant assistance program towards is underrepresented scientists who don't have as large a role in our program as we'd like them to. So doing a lot of outreach, for example, to HBCUs, to minority serving institutions, really to educate them about how they can start working with us on the idea that they're developing. And the applicant assistance program can really be a great program for them to tap into. We also offer another program. This one specifically is for women entrepreneurs. We call it the Women's Innovation Network. And this is a program that we exclusively offer to women that are part of our program right now. We give them the opportunity to network with each other and to really share lessons learned with each other. So every couple of months, the network will come together and they'll have a key speaker and they'll get valuable feedback on a topic that they have requested getting some guidance on. That has really helped us grow the numbers of women that we're actually funding in our program today. And then just in outreach, in terms of outreach in general, we're doing a lot more outreach to scientists who are underrepresented overall. So doing outreach to HBCUs and others, just educating them about SBIR as a program opportunity themselves. And we've been very active on social media. And also we developed a campaign specifically focused on Black entrepreneurs. And we're getting a really nice response from that.
It appears you're continuing with your progressiveness in how to grow this organization and the Institute as you continue to go down the road here, Michael. And another area of interest to me, and I'm sure to you as well, is your headquarters is located within Maryland, which is in the BioHealth Capital Region. And there's a great life science ecosystem that we have here in Maryland, DC, and Virginia, some of the top research universities. And of course, you have your sister agencies with the FDA and CMS and HHS. Talk a little bit about your interaction with your program. And we're talking with Michael Weingarten, who's the director of the SBIR Development Center at the National Cancer Institute, and how you interact with the other players within this region.
One of the best ways that I've found that I've built relationships is through the Maryland Life Science Advisory Board, just as one example, which is run by the state of Maryland. It's made up of leaders in life sciences, in industry, in academia, and in government. Rich, you're part of that group. I'm a member. We have representatives from the FDA also. And I find that that's a wonderful group to kind of connect the dots. There are just so many programs out there, and I'm sure you experience this too. I learn about a new program every day that someone offers. And I'm like, well, God, I wish I'd known about that program earlier. in this region in particular, just a wealth of resources. And the key is knowing the right people who can kind of steer you to what those resources are. Just as an example, with the FDA, we've been able to build a program, we call it CARE, the CARE program, a program we've been running over the last 5 years now, where we have relationships with each of the different major centers at the FDA. And if you talk to small businesses, they kind of look at the FDA as this big black box. They're very intimidated about how do you start a conversation with the FDA. They're nervous about it. We try to help demystify that process by offering the opportunity for companies that are in our portfolio to ask a couple of questions that they would like to get feedback on from the FDA. And then we take all those questions and we provide those questions to the FDA. They'll go to the right center based on the technology that's being developed, whether it's drug, device, diagnostic, and they'll actually get responses from FDA reviewers on the question that is being asked and provide that back. That can be just a really great starting point for companies that are starting to put together their regulatory strategies. And I mentioned other resources like at the NIH, for example, offered through the SEED program, including the entrepreneurs in residence. We also tap into those resources, which can be really beneficial to our companies too.
I think we could talk about this for a long time, especially with a lot of the interchange that goes on at these LSAB meetings that you're talking about. And the next plan for them is to develop and update the strategic plan that was done over 5 years ago and what can be done to enhance the long-term goals for the state of Maryland and this region. And the key members of that committee, of which you're involved, will also be providing significant input as to what should be done looking down the road 3, 5, and 10 years from now. So that's for the state of Maryland. But let's take a look at NCI's SBIR program for the next 3, 5, and 10 years. And what are your future goals for what you'd like to do with this program, Michael?
We're always looking at needs that our companies have and how do we help fill that need. And the Concept Award was in response to that. Going forward, we have this one program that we've recently kicked off called the Small Business Transition Grant, where we're trying to make it easier for early career academics that are interested in making the transition to a company. We're providing a funding source for them to continue their research and their technology development. We're also providing funding for mentors, both a business mentor and a technical mentor, to guide that early career academic, because it can be going to Mars for some people who have an interest of working on technology and they're like, I'd really like to move this technology out of my lab and move it towards a product down the road. But how do you make that first step and that first leap? It can be like going to Mars for a lot of people. That's a program that we're just building and learning about. How do we help academics make that transition? So it's again, a first of a kind program at the NIH. We kicked it off a couple of years ago. We're learning from that and we're realizing that we need to make some tweaks to how do we make it better. Going forward, I mentioned the Concept Award, bringing in these disruptive technologies into the program that can have an impact on pediatric and rare cancers. Going forward, I'm really interested in ramping up funding for those technologies that we're starting to fund and getting them into the clinic and then ultimately getting them out to patients. So I need to create additional programs to make that happen because pediatric and rare cancers are just very challenging areas. That's another thing that we're working on too. Those are just a couple of examples of goals going forward.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure that we'll be able to talk future about some of these new programs after you've implemented them.
Absolutely. Love to do that.
Is there anything that we haven't discussed today that you would like to share with the listeners before we sign off? And I think refreshing them again on your website so they can contact you and other things of importance that they may be interested in.
I guess the first thing I would suggest again as a starting point is going to our website, sbir.cancer.gov, and then signing up on our email list on our website. And if you do that, then whenever we come out with a new funding opportunity that we're putting out to the community, or a new educational opportunity or a new program, you're going to be the first ones to get it. That's just a great spot to start. And I mentioned how you could also reach out to us and request a meeting to talk to us about your technology. You can just send us an email from our website. We'll be happy to respond and set up a follow-on conversation. I think those were the main points.
That's great. Well, I hopefully covered most of the things of importance in your program, Michael. You've built a great program and a great team over the last almost 20 years now. So we hope you're going to be around another 20 to see the fruits of your labor, because sometimes it takes 20 years to get some research from the bench into the marketplace in this interesting industry that we're in. But I want to thank Michael Weingarten, the director of the SBIR Development Center at the National Cancer Institute, for being on BioTalk today. And we'll definitely follow up again, Michael.
Hey, thanks so much for the opportunity, Rich, and look forward to doing more of these in the future with you and continuing to share information.
Great. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.